And welcome back to Music Free Static. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And you know what? I like weird movies and books and things. I know you're totally shocked, I'm sure. Yes, I like mainstream stuff too, right? I like Star Wars, I like Casablanca, and right. But there is something fun and special and just silly, and I love it, about movies and books that are just a little bit weird, or sometimes very weird and goofy, and otherwise just fun. Okay. And as I said, there are a lot of great comedies that are fun and stuff on their own, but there are some things that just go into a certain just twist of bizarre and weirdness that is that I really, not unlike my grammar, is sometimes hard to follow and just goes off in a weird direction and is great. Okay. So let's dive into a few of these, and I'm not going to go in depth on any of these. Some of them I've done really late movie reviews on. I'll call those out if I remember as we go through. But let's start with the parodies. Okay, now parodies are almost by definition weird and bizarre and just goofy, nuts. Okay. Because what you're doing is you're taking a basic story and just warping it into some strange of a level of absurdity, okay? Now, the best parodies are ones that don't just take an existing movie and go shot for shot, sort of, with one exception, I'll get to that, but without basically taking every story beat and just making it a little bit weird, okay? I watched a superhero movie, I think it's called, where the main hero is the dragonfly and all, right? That movie kind of sucked, okay? I was hoping for more. And the reason I was hoping for more is I've seen good parodies and that one wasn't it, okay? Now, maybe there's some other ones out there, but I hope so, because I like a good parody. And one of my favorites is Spaceballs. Okay, now Spaceballs is amazing, but one of my favorite things about it is it doesn't go through and take Star Wars and say, all right, we're going to go and do every single story beat or whatever. Okay. It tells its own story, pulling inspiration from Star Wars, primarily Star Wars, but also a number of other movies, and tells its own story in a really ridiculous way. Right. And Spaceballs for me is probably the pinnacle of parodies right now. If you were to tell me to pick a movie, pick the best parody I've ever seen, Spaceballs is it. Okay. Aside from the fact that Mel Brooks has an amazing sense of humor, it's somewhat dirty. We'll get to that in a little bit more depth here in a minute. But it goes through and it just tells its own story. And it takes the idea of, the Force from Star Wars. Here it's not the Force, it's the Schwartz. And just twist things in all sorts of fun ways. And it's like, oh yeah, these people know about Star Trek. It's like, what are you doing? The Vulcan neck pinch? No, man, you got it too high. You gotta go. And it's just, sometimes it's just little things. Like there's a scene in it with a movie rental, which is just hilarious, talking about now. Right? It is fun. And yeah, it is just a bit not right in the head, which I like. Okay. Along the same lines is Robin Hood Men in Tights. Right? This was Mel Brooks' second movie, but his movie that came after Spaceballs, where he took Robin Hood. Now, unlike Spaceballs, which pulled, primarily from Star Wars, but had callbacks to Star Trek and Aliens and a bunch of other things, Robin Hood Men in Tights is Robin Hood. Okay? And this one follows more or less, it's the Robin Hood story. That's pretty much the same whether you're watching the Errol Flynn Robin Hood or Robin Hood Prince of Thieves or anything else, right? You've got that same basic story. Picking up at, or starting maybe at various points in Robin's life. Prince of Thieves starts off where he's been captured during the Crusades. I think Errol Flynn's Robin Hood starts with him already in Sherwood Forest as leading his merry men, right? Whatever. But you've got that same sort of story. Men in Tights definitely goes off in some weird directions, okay? The Robin Hood story is the Robin Hood story, but Carrie Elwes plays an amazing Robin, right? But you've got, and this is where Mel Brooks decided to slip a little further down the raunch scale that I'm particularly excited about, but, it's, here's the key to the greatest treasure in the whole land, and it's a key to Maid Marian's chastity belt, right? You can see where that's going. But there's some silly stuff, and to dip away to a musical number about singing about we're men in tights is hilarious. Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's the best parody ever. That would be Spaceballs, but it is a whole different breed of fun, and I love it. Okay. Going really old school, we can talk about like Airplane, right? Now, Airplane was basically a scene-for-scene reshoot of a different movie whose title I've forgotten. If you know, drop it in the comments. But the story is there's a bunch of passengers and the flight crew of an airplane get sick because of something with the food. And a pilot or a passenger then has to land the plane. Okay. Well, in this case, it's a passenger who is a war veteran dealing with PTSD, as we would call it now. And, oh yeah, he breaks out in sweats, in which case, what basically water is literally water falling down. It's hilarious. And it just goes through making some really absurd jokes that nobody calls out as jokes, right? Which it's one of the signs of a good comedy in a lot of ways, is when you can drop a joke without turning to the camera and winking. Okay. And this pulls a lot of those, right? It's like you'll have jokes where it'd be like, it's the Shirley, that's not true. Yes, it is true. And don't call me Shirley. It's like, okay, yes, right. It's just silly and stupid, and it's a running gag throughout the movie, where they basically just take things hyper literal. And I love that sometimes, right? I love that sort of weirdness. I was going to talk about books and stuff later, but jump ahead a little. The cartoon Strange Planet, that comic by Nathan Pyle, I think it is. I love, not because it's particularly funny, because it's not. What it is it just completely changes how the language is used to describe just normal everyday things. And I love that just weird twist in reality. Okay. I love that stuff. Staying old school here, but The Cheap Detective, which I think started as a play, but then they made it into a movie starring dude, the guy who plays Columbo, and I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he plays basically every Humphrey Bogart character ever. Right? It is a send-up of all of the film noir movies of the day, right? Like all of them at once. You've got Casablanca, you've got the Maltese Falcon, probably a couple others. Film noir is not my cup of tea typically, but it is all sorts of fun. And man, it said it runs a little slower. It's not the type of knee-slapping hilarity you'd get from like Spaceballs. You just watch this and it's like, if you've seen film noir at all, right? But especially if you've seen Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, or all of those other types of movies, you'll pick up exactly where all of this is coming from, and it's like, yeah, oh, this is just fun and silly, and the other characters that show up are just weird, and it makes them a special breed of fun. Okay, Dom DeLuise plays a character. It's the overpowering fat man. Okay, and you'll recognize this type of guy, right? He's the head mob boss, or the somewhat slimy informant, or like in Casablanca, he's the guy who Ferrari, who owns the Blue Parrot, right? It's the guy who's overconfident, or maybe perfectly confident, but he has power and authority or something, and he wears it like a coat, and he's just fat and a little slimy. Okay, in The Chief Detective, this character is played by Dom DeLuise, who will not literally slimy, right? He has an overwhelming stench that he uses to keep his enemies far away. And yeah, it's just one of those, okay, that was a turn. yeah, you did that. That's great, and it was fun. And then you get movies like Hot Shots or The Naked Gun. Again, Naked Gun goes a little bit far down the raunch scale that I particularly like. Hot Shots is great as a parody of Top Gun. And I think I did a really late movie review of Hot Shots. But those are the types where it's like, we're going to have this insanely goofy stuff happen, and everyone just accepts that this is reality and moves on, right? And that's part of what makes a good parody really good, is you're not dealing with that sort of winking, okay? Now, that said, I have seen one movie that pulls that off fairly well. And that movie was Kung-Pow, Enter the Fist, okay? Do not go into Kung-Pow, Enter the Fist expecting to watch a good movie, because it's not, okay? It is 3 probably bad movies spliced together in a way that's fun. Okay, so basically what they did is they took 2 old kung fu movies. It's like a movie and its sequel, because it's the same characters or something like that. Or maybe it's just the same actors. I don't know. I've not seen the original movies. And then they spliced it together with modern shots of this one guy who is the chosen one and has all sorts of weird stuff. And they spliced it together to tell this story. And this is 100% winking at the camera, okay? They have a behind the scenes on the DVD of how they filmed it, because a lot of those kung fu movies, of course, they redubbed into English badly, right? It's the stereotypical view of the guy's lips moving and the words don't match anything close, right? Like he'll start flapping his lips. Oh, we need to save the world, and then right. You can see there was more dialogue there than was actually said, or something like along those lines. Fairly typical, and you'd have that stuff that wouldn't match anyway, right? Because when you're dealing with humans, it doesn't match. You can get away with an animation, less so in real life. Anyway, all of that said, this is 100% fourth wall breaking silliness. But when they filmed it, the actors are not they're not speaking dialogue, right? They're speaking random words, right? So instead of, hey, who are you? It's like chicken soup or some other weird things, right? And then they redubbed their nonsense into English, so you still get that bad lip matching dubbing effect, okay? Stupid movie, not good. I still enjoy it. There's a special breed of weird, especially with call-outs to the Matrix and stuff like that. So if you're looking for something really out there that's just crazy, okay, Kung-Pow, Enter the Fist is probably it. But then the other side of that is a movie like Dragnet, which isn't strictly a parody. Okay, Dragnet might fall more into more of the normal comedy shtick, because it is pretty much a basic cop movie, detective movie. Okay, but if you've seen the Dragnet TV shows, which no shame if you haven't, they're old and nobody's seen Dragnet. But the main character in that series, Joe Friday, has a very specific way of talking. It's sort of fast, kind of monotone, and very precise in a lot of ways. Okay, and sometimes very intense, while staying within that rigidity of that monotone. Okay, which is you hear it, and you'll understand. So in Dragnet, stars Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. Dan Aykroyd plays the nephew of Joe Friday from the TV show. And he pulls off that same delivery cadence, and it is classic. And because they've played this as a comedy rather than a drama like the original show was, that delivery just becomes part of the comedy. And really, it's fun. And things just go in weird directions and all sorts of fun stuff. Dragnet is a fun movie. And again, it's more comedy. I said, this is one of those where I would not consider it a parody of Dragnet, but I think it is a loving homage. And I said, it's a comedy rather than a drama, but all sorts of fun. And what's actually interesting is so the main story is that some group calling themselves pagans has basically stolen. I mean, they've committed lots of crimes. They've stolen a mane from a lion. They've stolen a fruit bat and a giant snake and some chemicals and what other stuff. But they've also stolen the entire run of Bait magazine, which is basically the movie's version of Playboy or something like that. It's a pornographic magazine. And so here is our hero, Joe Friday, who is upright, the paladin, right? he's just, the goody two shoes, and he's now having to find the smut that he would normally denounce, right? And that's the thing, because like I said, I like normal comedies, but sometimes I like a comedy that's not necessarily a parody, but it just goes off the deep end somewhere. Okay, Monsters vs. Aliens is a great example of that. Now, I both detest who was it, Jon Stewart, I think, who plays the president. I do not like him in everything I've seen him do, whether it's his show, his stand-up, anything. Not been a fan, but he does a great job playing the president in Monsters vs. Aliens. But the monsters that they have are your typical hilarity, right? They're adaptations of the monsters you would get from your B-movie monster movies, right? There is the Thing, the Swamp Thing, right? The missing link, they call him in the movie, who wandered up on a beach, terrorized some people, and is now in this prison. Or you've got Bob, which actually stands for something I don't remember right offhand, but he's basically the Blob and has like maybe one functioning brain cell. And you've got the mad scientist, Dr. Cockroach, who tried to cure disease or something and turn himself into a cockroach. And then you've got Susan, who was getting ready for her wedding, gets hit by a meteorite, and now she is Ginormica, the 50-foot woman or something like that, right? And aliens attack and invade the planet, and now the government calls on the monsters to stop the aliens. And this this is just one bit of silly insanity after another. And it hits me in just the right way. And there are some jokes that it's like, as an adult, you get, it's like, yes, okay, I've been in those situations. I've been in those relationships. I understand what's going on here, right? It's a special breed of fun. And like, and The Emperor's New Groove, right, goes in the same way, where it's, I don't know, it's just something about movies about main characters, and normally I act with actors I don't like. I don't know. But The Emperor's New Groove, David Spade, again, is a comedian. I don't like his breed of comedy, because his comedy tends to be very angry. Okay. It's like Don Rickles, who was an insult comic, not typically a fan. David Spade's sort of the same way. I'm not a fan of that level of comedy, but it was perfect for an emperor who is just that full of himself. And then the story, of course, is him changing and becoming a better person through, being turned into a llama, like, most people have, right? But it's the characters that make The Emperor's New Groove all sorts of fun, right? But especially Kronk, who is played to perfection. Kronk is probably the best thing in the movie. And it said, everything's a little bit weird, right? This is one of those movies you could pull about every third line out of context and it is perfect for use elsewhere. It's like, you'll see the wrong lever, right? Pull the lever, Kronk. And then the cry, wrong lever, as she falls down a trap door, right? and of course the obvious question, why do we even have that lever? And there's a special breed of weird silliness with The Emperor's New Groove that I love. I love that. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is another most excellent example, right? Because Bill and Ted are idiots, right? Now, the problem you have with a story full of idiots, especially with comedies, is more often than not, the comedy is really stupid. And as much as I like comedy, and sometimes I do like a really stupid joke, if you want stupid jokes, I do dad jokes and stuff on my gaming streams over at Music Free Gaming. But the jokes in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure tend to actually be really smart, or very subtle. And I think I've talked about it before with Sigmund Freud walking up to a table full of hot young women holding a corn dog erect, because a lot of Freud's theories dealt with equating things to sex and stuff like that. I'm not a psychologist. I've not studied Freud in depth. I just know there's a lot of that there, and so to pull those together, and they don't say anything about it. He's holding a corn dog. He's in a mall food court, right? But it's just one of those very subtle jokes that if you know, and it's worth a laugh, right? So yeah, it's fun, it's silly, and it just goes in a really odd direction, right? Monty Python was great at that type of thing, right? Where they would just do something like the Ministry of Silly Walks, right? England, the United Kingdom, has ministries for everything. Of course they would have a Ministry of Silly Walks, right? And they had a number of sketches where they would either take the literal to the extreme, right? Where, I'm here to have an argument, which seems like a silly thing, but sure, okay, we have an argument. And, no, I'm sorry, this is abuse. An argument's 2 doors down. Thank you. And, right, so you get those types of things, or the dead parrot sketch is one of my favorites, where guy buys a parrot, it was dead, and the shopkeeper is deflecting in every possible way to not have to deal with a refund, right? If anyone's who's gone into a shop, yep, this is totally a thing, right? Right, so Monty Python, no, Monty Python will often, like I say, same thing, go off the raunch scale, but you watch something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? It's just this whole special breed of silly, and surprisingly, one of the movies with the most accurate depictions of medieval armor that you'll ever see, which is weird, but yeah. So, it's just the special breed of weird that I guess shifts expectations, right? Because you go into some movies and it's like, yeah, I expect it to, this is a comedy, I expect to be laughing. But when they shift why and how you're laughing or what's making things funny, right? The Three Amigos takes basically the story of the Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai, except does it with three. But, they hire the heroes to come save the town. Except the town, well, I mean, the town is dealing with the murderous El Guapo, who is dealing with all this stuff. But the heroes, they're actors, right? So you get that miscommunication. And they're not the smartest people in the world. And they call that out even in the movies. These two women in the town are liking. Which one do you like? So I like the one who's not so smart. Which one is that? It's like, yeah, you're not narrowing it down any with those three. And it's they're out to find the invisible swordsman who will guide them to El Guapo's thing. So they do this whole ritual to shoot their guns up in the air, except for Lucky, who shoots off to the side and kills the invisible swordsman. Yeah, there's just a level of absurdity there that I love. Okay, but then there's those they're not totally absurd, like we're just totally gone off the deep end. There's just something that's just not right. And the classic is the Muppets, right? You go back to the Muppet Show, early Sesame Street, of course, anything with Jim Henson and Frank Oz and that whole thing. You can totally see everything's going. It's just something's not quite right. And that's said, it's a level of comedy that I love, right? It's weird and bizarre and just fun. And I like when the comedy tries to be kind of smart about it sometimes, but also just, we're just going to take this one little concept and go absurd, right? So stepping out of movies and going into books, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, which you can see on the bookshelf here behind me. It's this green book over here. That absolutely follows that of, we're going to take one thing here and go completely absurd with it. Okay. Now, and then he does it a lot. Whether it's the bureaucracy that leads to the destruction of both Arthur Dent's house and the Earth, or the lore behind hitchhiking with a towel, or just any of that type of thing. It's just weird and goes off in weird directions, right? Percy Jackson. Now, the Percy Jackson books they're YA books, okay? They're fun. They're not what I would typically consider a comedy necessarily, but they pull some weird things that I really enjoy, right? Because they're bringing in first Greek and then later Roman mythology into the modern world, or at least modern whenever it was written, right? And shows a way that the myths might change in a modern world, okay? You've got Cersei, who's supposed to be doomed to be helping heroes, and now she runs a day spa. She runs the spa to theoretically help heroes, right? Or you've got the Minotaur shows up, but instead of wearing a loincloth, he's wearing tighty whities, right? everything's just a little weird. but it's that weirdness that it's like, okay, yeah, this is fun. I'm digging this, right? And sometimes literally calling out some of the, what we now would look at some of the absurdities or these are not great people, but telling that in a weird, fun, and exciting way, right? Another one, this is a book I just read a couple of, last week. Yeah, holy cow, it's only last week. Was A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, right? In a world where magic is a thing, there are some really powerful people who can call down lightning and windstorms and all this stuff. And then some people who just have something subtle. Like there's one guy who can straighten knots out of boards, and he went into woodworking, and that really helps him in his woodworking. Or this one person, her magic power is she can control dead horses. Okay, you think that's hardly anything, but she gets paid well because in a medieval society, horses die, and how do you get them out of town to the knackers who are going to do, who are going to take care of the dead horses? Well, in reality, okay, the horse is dead there for a while, you got to bring in carts. No, she can walk in, commands the horse to get up and just walk away. Right. Well, our hero is a baker. And her power, she can convince bread that, hey, it doesn't want to burn. It wants to bake and be wonderful. And it does, right? She can occasionally make gingerbread men get up and dance. And sometimes the type of dance they do depends on how they made the gingerbread, right? So, because I guess the ingredients help determine the personality. I don't know, right? She brought a sourdough starter to life. Yeah, it's that sort of book. Now, said the book itself is not a comedy necessarily. Fun, and it is a fun book, but it doesn't go off in the really goofy direction. It just goes into the weird case of your power is you can control bread and dough. And what? and now you're in a crisis, and how does that help you? And it's all sorts of fun, right? It is a fun book, right? And then of course there's music. You can't talk about weird and just totally bizarre and out there and goofy without talking about Weird Al Yankovic, or Tom Lehrer, or They Might Be Giants, right? There are a couple, like, of course Weird Al is, S tier, novelty music, right? If it's, whether it's his parody of different songs, or he has some of his own that are all sorts of fun. But heck, there are some Weird Al songs that I heard for years before I heard the original, right? The song The White Stuff that Weird Al sings as an homage to the creamy filling in an Oreo. It's a parody of, was it New Kids on the Block? And the song The Right Stuff or something like that. I had not heard that song ever. It was probably 10 years later before I heard the original, right? And then there are a few who he parodied songs that I wouldn't have heard anyway, because it was rap or something else that just wouldn't have crossed my threshold of awareness. But fun and creative and goofy in all sorts of good ways, right? Tom Lehrer was another one. Now his music tends to be a little bit more sarcastic, which is cool. And it's older. You're going back into the 50s and 60s. He also wrote a lot of music for like a kids show or something at one point. But he goes off on some weird stuff, and some of it's just crazy. Like he did a song where he sang the periodic table. Yeah, that one. Yes, he sings antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and he just goes off down the entire periodic table. It's a fun party trick if you can do it. I heard Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter and a number of other characters, he learned to do that, right? Fun song. He also did a song where he's just doing math. Yeah, seriously, where he's doing subtraction, and he does the problem twice, once in base 10 and once in base 8. That is just strange and bizarre. But yeah, a lot of his songs were political and sarcastic, okay, which is fine. I like sarcasm. I speak it fairly well some days. But again, it just tends to go off in sort of weird ways, and it's fun. Then you get groups like They Might Be Giants with songs like Istanbul, Not Constantinople, or the song Triangle Man, or it's Particle Man, I think is the name of the song. But I first heard those songs on an episode of Tiny Toon Adventures, where they did animated music videos to both of them. I was like, whoa, this is weird. And I got the album, and yeah, most of their songs are weird. Musically, I don't like a lot of their songs, but yeah, some of them are fun and weird. And the group Bare Naked Ladies, right? They went pop for a while and had some regular songs on the radio, but they did comedy songs before that. And they did one. It was a different alphabet, right? So it was the alphabet song, ABC, right? But with a bunch of words that, yeah, like A is for aisle, as in the thing you walk down in a store, right? C is for czar, right? CZAR, right? And they just keep going down that list of, P is for pneumonia. Yes, it is, but I like comedy that tends to go off in weird, goofy ways without getting just overly slapsticky, right? And man, there is some great stuff out there. Unfortunately, it's a really hard thing to do. It really is, but when it's done well, you get something that is just an instant classic because it is so unique, right? Anybody can tell the same joke, right? And a lot of them do. But if you can do something really unique, and that's most of these shows did. Heck, I didn't even talk about the TV show Gallivant, which was on for, I think it was 2 seasons. It was one of those shows, it was dreamed up. It was like, there were short seasons, like 10, 12 episode seasons. And it was the filler, right? So you have your regular TV season that ends at the new year or something like that. And then you start up again in the fall, or yeah, something like that. 3 or 4 months later, whatever. Gallivant was the show that ABC put together to fill in that gap for a couple of years. And ABC is owned by Disney. And they got Disney legend Alan Menken to write songs for every episode. And it is a musical. And it is a strange and bizarre musical. Heck, Weird Al actually shows up as the leader of this group of singing monks. Yeah, it's that sort of and they sing Weird Al jazzy type weirdness, but it is it is a weird and silly show. Here's the hero, the dashing sword fighter, and the girl that he finds, and apparently they are really good together or something like that. And here's the king who sees the hot girl and decides he wants the hot girl and takes her. Well, Gallivant goes to rescue her, and she doesn't want to be rescued. Turns out she likes being rich and powerful. And now what? Yeah, it's a silly, silly show. And it's unique. And partly because they went musical with it. And they send up they take shots at everything, Game of Thrones and all of those sorts of heroic, you know, heroic uh, medieval type stories, but it's the fantasy and all that fun stuff. It's fun. It's worth watching if you like a little giggle and sometimes some good music. So, oh, I've rambled on a lot, but I love this stuff, man. Man, as much as I like a good dramas tend to get boring for me, but I like a great story. I love watching Casablanca, for example, and I like I like an action comedy and things like that. But sometimes I want something that goes off the deep end in a way that you just don't expect. And hopefully, I've given you a handful of some that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. Like, trust me, if you have not seen a funny thing happen on the way to the forum, you're missing out. Okay? Again, it's an old movie, probably one that's not going to get a lot of play these days because it talks about slavery in the Roman Empire, and in particular, how do they put it in the introduction? Marcus Lycus, this is the House of Lycus, where they buy and sell the flesh of beautiful women. Yeah, horrifically politically incorrect. Okay, if you're looking for something that is pro, feminist, whatever, this is not it. Okay, don't expect that. But it is a fun, goofy comedy, and the songs are catchy and weird, and you'll catch me singing some of them on stream with my own words because I grew up with Weird Al, and that's just how I do things. I listened to Weird Al a lot as a kid, but it's just a level of weird that I love. So let me know. Drop a comment here on YouTube or on Spotify or in the Discord. Let me know, because man, I love this stuff. It just makes life a little happier for me, and I love it. So until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Static signing off.